Hey, I'm Trey. Today's story is about a killer that was in denial. This denial became so overwhelming that the killer took the frustration out on the victim in an excessively brutal and morbid way. To find out what those strongholds are, you have to wait until later in the story. Only strong stomachs, please. If you can't handle the truth, then this is not the video for you. If you're interested in stories about lesser known serial killers spanning countries and centuries, then this is the channel for you. Well, if you're ready, let's get started. March 1991, in the Republic of China, the authorities were contacted by an unknown source about a fire that was in progress. When the police arrived, they found that the fire was in the middle of a wheat field. As they approached the source, it was found to be a large pile of wheat that was set ablaze by an unknown person. The fire was eventually extinguished. When the authorities took a closer look at what was engulfed in the fire, the body of an unidentified man was found, charred beyond recognition. The victim appeared to have been disemboweled by the killer, along with being decapitated. It was also discovered that the victim's genitalia was cut off and removed. Surprise! Detectives responded and did a large search of the immediate area with negative results. I guess both his heads were taken. The following day, the police tracking dog was called out, and the head and the genitalia were both found together a short distance away from the crime scene. Later, during the autopsy, it was determined that the body had strangulation marks around the neck, stemming from some type of rope. It was believed to be the cause of death. The investigators determined that the victim had been killed recently due to the freshly eaten food found in the victim's stomach. The media was notified and the public's help was requested to identify the body with negative results. The police found no witnesses or leads, and the man remained unidentified for the time being. Approximately 14 months later, the naked body of a middle-aged man was found in the prone position. A rope was tied around the victim's neck and another rope was tied around the victim's wrists. The victim's skull was literally cracked open enough where you were able to actually see the brain. A nearby concrete brick was found that was covered in blood and brain matter. Detectives believed that the man was strangled unconscious and the brick was used to murder him. The victim was later identified by the family as a special needs mentally ill man whose name was not provided. The police canvassed the area for clues and witnesses, obviously, and was told that several people observed the victim with an unidentified man. That man was well dressed and much younger than the victim. The stranger was seen begging for food in the company of the victim. This was a small, tightly knit rural community where everyone knew each other. The people that attempted to aid them were curious. They had never seen the stranger before, let alone in the company of the local mentally ill man. The locals asked the strange man where was he from, and he responded that he was from a nearby local village. He kind of brushed them off whenever people would ask about him. The authorities were notified of this, and a search was done for the stranger in said local village with negative results. Approximately 2 weeks after the last homicide, a third victim was found in an abandoned warehouse. It was a man that was found in an advanced stage of decomposition. The man was found completely naked and lying in the prone position. It was obvious to the authorities the victim was bludgeoned to death. Blood and brain matter was found scattered all over the floor. The killer took some of the victim's blood and left a sadistic message written on the wall. This is crazy. That message was, quote, "I am the killer," end quote, and the word, quote, "sacrifice," end quote. When the police canvassed the neighborhood and spoke to the residents, several of them stated that they saw a young, well-dressed man that accompanied the victim the day prior. They were both seen walking together near the railway station and not far from where the crime scene was found. A well-dressed man was seen beating the victim with a stick as they walked together in public. Other witnesses stated that they saw them together the evening before sleeping in a nearby wheat field. The police ran out of witnesses and clues, so this, along with the other cases, were filed under cold case. For approximately the next 3 years, the killer murdered an additional 7 people. The victims were all men, and all of them were mentally ill or suffering from dementia. All the victims were found completely naked, or naked from the waist down at least. They were each found with ligament marks or an actual rope tied around their necks and or wrists. The bodies were disposed of in local canals, lakes, or ponds. Although all of the bodies were in an advanced state of decomposition, the authorities believed that they were all murdered via strangulation. Out of all the bodies, most were identified by the local residents. In each one of those cases, witnesses came forward and stated that each victim was seen with a well-dressed, unidentified young man that they had never seen in the area before. It was also reported that that same stranger wasn't from the area. The police investigated 40 different men from all the local towns that matched the description of this stranger that was given to them. Out of the list of men that the authorities compiled, a man by the name of Lee Zanggu, God bless you, became a person of interest. He, along with 39 men, were all brought in for questioning by the authorities. All of the men were eventually released due to the lack of evidence. The police had no further witnesses or leads. The last and final murder took place in March of 1995. The victim was a middle-aged man that was immediately identified, but no name was provided. It was determined that the victim suffered from mental illness. His body was found floating in a nearby canal. The victim was removed from the water, and it was determined that he had been decapitated. The victim was naked from the waist down, and his clothing was nowhere to be found. When the autopsy was completed, it was determined that burn marks were found in between the victim's buttocks and legs. The locals began to show their contempt and frustration towards the authorities for their lack of results. Many undercover officers, along with additional patrolling units, were placed in the area to aid in the search. They were all ordered to detain anyone that could have possibly met the description of the actor. The police were also instructed to keep an eye on all of the local mentally ill and or people that suffer from dementia. In August of the same year, an undercover detective, while on routine surveillance, the detective observed 2 men walking down a local isolated road together. As he got closer, he noticed that one of the men was much younger than the second, and he was nicely dressed. The other man with him seemed dirty and disheveled. The detective also recognized that the disheveled man as one that lived in a nearby village and was known to be suffering from dementia. Since the unknown stranger matched the description so well, the detective chose to contact other officers to aid with the undercover surveillance of this guy. The men were followed by the detective to an isolated location in the middle of a cornfield. The detective noticed that the well-dressed man began undressing the man that was suffering with dementia. The detective knew that this strange guy was looking to take advantage of the other guy's dementia. The well-dressed man was arrested and brought back to the police department for an interview. That man's name was Lee Zanggu. After hours of questioning, Lee confessed to all of the murders. When the detectives asked why did he murder the victims, he gave a sickening response. Lee admitted to being a homosexual, but was frustrated that none of the men that he was actually interested in found him attractive. So check this out. Lee lived in a small community where the dating pool for homosexual men was extremely small. This left him sexually frustrated. This in turn caused him to sexually assault people that were mentally ill. Afterwards, he became so upset with the victims because they weren't the people that he wanted to have relations with. So he would then resort to one or more of the following, which was either to strangle them to death, bludgeon them to death, cutting off their genitalia, or decapitating them. He was ultimately charged, found guilty, and executed the following year. If you enjoy more stories such as these, click on one of the suggested videos above. I upload new content every Tuesday and Thursday. God bless and stay safe.